Welcome back to Chicago, Illinois. Today's video is going to be some interesting history and something else that's very unique in this area just on the other side of this bridge. So let's go take a look. I really love these bridges that they have underneath the streets here. It's really fascinating and very pretty colors today also. But one thing I want to show you before we go into the museum is that we like cemeteries here on this channel. It's one of the things that we do. And oh, there's a random dog walking over here. But the grounds here used to be Chicago City Cemetery, and Chicago City Cemetery is no more. It no longer exists. But there is one marked grave still here. And that's this right up here. This is the Couch tomb, named for Ira Couch. He was a Chicago businessman. And most of the people here were exhumed, moved to other cemeteries. Many also were not. Now there's a bunch of softball fields on the other side of the road over here that it's said that after a really good rainstorm, sometimes a bone will occasionally surface. And I don't know about you, but if I'm playing softball for fun, I probably don't want to trip on a femur, but it is said to have happened. But this is a legendary grave here, tomb, mausoleum, that a lot of people claim is very, very haunted, because this whole area around us was disturbed for this park and for the history museum and everything else around us, because this cemetery goes back to the mid-1800s. Now this is the Couch tomb. They have built a fence around it, but this is the only standing marker that reminds you that the city cemetery was here. They permanently closed this. As you can see, they bolted that together. But very interesting. If you Google the Couch Mausoleum, or the Couch Tomb, as they call it, there's a lot of paranormal stories about this. And I don't want to tell you the stories because I don't want to mess it up, or I don't want to, change the lore or anything like that. But this was just one of the things I happened to be walking by, and I remembered the story about it. But we are going to head into the Chicago History Museum in a few minutes, and I can't wait to show you this place. But this tomb deserved a special call out, because this is a reminder of some Chicago history that has since kind of been lost. If you do searches on Chicago City Cemetery, there's information out there, but there's not really anything labeling the fact that that's what this once was. So let's keep on moving. Now, if you've been a part of the channel for a while, you'll know that I love presidential history. Now, right behind me is the Chicago History Museum, and they have one of the most interesting pieces of American history. You'd think it would be in Washington, D.C., but no, it's here in Chicago, and that is Abraham Lincoln's deathbed, the actual bed from the Peterson boarding house across from the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. So that's what we're going to go in and take a look at today, as well as a lot of things related to Chicago history. So let's go. The Chicago History Museum. We have arrived. The journey begins. This really is an incredible place. City on Fire, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. There's a fire alarm telegraph box from around 1871. Here's an exhibit from the Chicago Fire Department. There's a Chicago Fire Department fire marshal helmet, a firefighter badge, pocket watch. It says the firefighter helmet was circa 1871. That is incredible. There's a mock-up of the Great Chicago Fire crossing the river from the south to the north side. Here's a keg of nails melted together from the Great Chicago Fire. It's just unbelievable to think about. Here's some of the old keys from buildings that were destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire. I always thought these keys were pretty interesting. A lot of people collect them too. And if you know the famous historic story about the O'Leary cow starting the Great Chicago Fire, the cow was deemed innocent in recent years, but this is a bell that is said to have hung around the neck of one of Mrs. O'Leary's cows at the time of the fire. And the first page of Mrs. O'Leary's testimony during the inquiry into the cause of the Great Chicago Fire. Chicago, crossroads of America. Now, I remember coming here years and years ago, and they always had this train here, and I always thought this was pretty cool. Here's a mock-up of Fort Dearborn, built in 1803. The actual Fort Dearborn, not this mock-up. Here is a locomotive. It says this one was called the Pioneer. You can walk up and get a look in here. This is a plaster model of the Chicago Water Tower. It's one of the few buildings that made it through the Great Chicago Fire. Here's some steel handcuffs owned by Captain Michael Shack from the Chicago Police Department from 1886. And a Chicago police badge. And one of their old revolvers. It's a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. Now, Prohibition was a big thing in Chicago. A lot of people were making bootleg liquor. That's one of the things that made Al Capone very wealthy. But Prohibition in Chicago, people were making a lot of alcohol. And this is a copper still and bucket for making alcohol, dating back to around 1920. So a little information on it if you want to pause it and read it. The Eastland disaster, one of the most deadly maritime occurrences ever. I mean, it didn't happen overseas, it happened here in the Chicago River. 919 bodies recovered. So on the morning of Saturday, July 24th, 1915, employees of Western Electric and their families began boarding excursion boats on the Chicago River to take them to the annual company picnic. As the steamer Eastland boarded first, and the weight of 2,500 passengers made an already unstable ship dangerous. With everyone ready for departure, the Eastland suddenly capsized, throwing those on the upper decks into the river's current. There's a picture of it, tipped over. The tragedy claimed 844 lives, more than any other disaster in Chicago's history. Here is a baggage tag from the Eastland. And this is a stateroom key from the Eastland from 1915. And a postcard. It is incredible. And this is an iron whistle from the Eastland from 1903. Here's a wooden folding chair from the Eastland. What a tragic day in American history. Let's head up the ramp to check out the train. Times were definitely different, but this doesn't look like a bad way to travel. Now, Chicago was also the home of many original department stores, like Marshall Field, Montgomery Ward, and Sears. If you remember the old mail order catalogs, you could actually order a house. Yeah, here we go. Montgomery Ward and Sears catalogs. The times have changed. Chicago Jazz and Blues. Duke Ellington, B.B. King, Coming Attraction, Ray Charles. It's from 1972. Here's Floyd Jones' bass and his amp. Here's some old jazz instruments. There's the Playboy Club that started in Chicago. A key, ashtray, swizzle sticks. And here's one of the original Playboy Bunny outfits. It's from 1972. Ben Zobrist jersey from the 2016 Cubs World Series. He was MVP that World Series. Pretty good game use on that one. Here's Dennis Rodman's shoes worn during the 97-98 postseason for the Chicago Bulls. Anybody remember the worm? There's a Scottie Pippen jersey. Not one he wore, this was a replica. And these are still cool. Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. Probably one of the best Chicago Bears of all time. Maybe even one of the best football players of all time. Here's a Marquette and Joliet sculpture. Now over here is going to be an Abraham Lincoln exhibit, and this is what we came for. Here is give you a better view of that. Abraham Lincoln portrait. Now, Lincoln was going to see Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. It's April 14th, 1865. The star of it was Laura Keene, and that in the middle is John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor at the time. Obviously, we all know what he's known for now. But they have some different items here from Lincoln. This is a gold pocket watch that was presented to Abraham Lincoln, 1861. And next to some slave shackles, Lincoln famously freed the slaves with his Emancipation Proclamation. Looked at now as a very popular president, but back then he was not very fondly looked at by a lot of people. Now just in here is the actual bed that Lincoln passed away on. He was brought over from Ford's Theater to Peterson boarding house across the street. But this is the original bed that Lincoln died on. And you would think it would still be at the Peterson boarding house, but no, it's here in the Chicago History Museum. Isn't that incredible? It's April 14th and 15th, 1865. After he's shot, Lincoln's carried across the street to the Peterson boarding house. He's taken to a small back room and placed upon this bed. Lincoln at 6'4" doesn't fit and must be placed at an angle. Edward Stanton famously said, "Now he belongs to the ages." Just incredible. Here's a life mask of Lincoln taken February of 1865. As you can see, if you look at pictures of him from 1860, 1861, the presidency aged him horribly. But the Abraham Lincoln deathbed, and this is too incredible to just not show. Here's some items from a Pullman train car porter, which would have been quite the job back then. One of the hats, you can see a Pullman porter on there. And they often had to have identity badges here, which they have a couple of. And this right here is, they call it a berth key. It was routine to prepare passengers' beds or sleeping berths, one of the porter's most time-consuming tasks. Here's some Civil War items from a soldier's camp from 1863. If you notice, the forks only had two thingies on it. My brain's not working very good right now. Two spokes. And here's what some of the dominoes looked like back in the day. A couple of dice, very small. Here's a diorama of the Great Chicago Fire. If you could just think of the magnitude of this, I mean, this really burnt down just about the entire city. Here's Courthouse Square, back around 1865. Much different than Chicago looks like today. Here's Washington Park Racetrack. It's one of the first horse racing facilities. And it says there's a button here, so like a little kid, I have to push it. Okay, that place was incredible. There was a lot of interesting exhibits there, a lot of really neat history. And I absolutely could not possibly show you everything they had because it would have taken forever and nobody wants to watch that much of a video. But I highly recommend this place. If you want to come and visit, it costs $19 for adults. Well worth the price of admission. But yeah, absolutely phenomenal place, a lot of history. But that's all I have for you for today. So thanks for joining today, and we'll catch you on the next video. Take care, everybody.